Did y'all know Connecticut had an abandoned highway? This is an abandoned highway in Connecticut, y'all. This is crazy. Look at this, man. It's like The Walking Dead out here, y'all. Look. Oh my God. This is wild. Last time this highway was touched was in 1970. This highway was supposed to extend from Hartford to New London, but the state stopped it because of money issues. But this is a crazy highway, guys. Like, this is crazy. Bro, how did he get on the highway? Yo, the highway is abandoned, bro. How did he just get on? I wonder where that takes you. This is very creepy, y'all. Oh my God. People were here in 1999. Crazy, y'all. Look at this. A whole stretch of highway just abandoned, man. For over 30 years.
I do not recommend anybody come here. Repeat, I do not recommend anybody come here.
Fairfield Hills State Hospital was a psychiatric hospital in Newtown, Connecticut, which operated from 1931 until 1995. At its peak, the hospital housed over 4,000 patients. The entire facility was owned and operated by the State of Connecticut Department of Mental Health. The facility still stands just southeast of the center of Newtown. During its operation, treatments at Fairfield Hills included hydrotherapy, insulin shock therapy, electroshock therapy, and frontal lobotomy. In the first year that psychosurgery was performed at Fairfield Hills, over 100 patients were treated. Due to deinstitutionalization in the 60s and 70s, there was less of a need for hospitals like Fairfield Hills. With the high cost of running underused hospitals, state hospitals around the country shut their doors. In 1995, Governor John Rowland closed Fairfield Hills and its sister hospital, Norwich State Hospital. All patients that remained were moved to Connecticut Valley Hospital in Middletown. Urbexers and ghost hunters alike claim to see paranormal activity throughout the buildings. These buildings are not up for tours or overnights. However, if you're in the area, stop by and check out the New Salem Brewery. Have a drink and go check out the architecture.
Connecticut, can we talk about this place real quick? This is Dudleytown, an abandoned area in the Valley of Connecticut, owned by the Dark Entry Forest Association. Supposedly nobody's allowed here at all. I've heard stories like some man supposedly murdered his whole family here, and now the place is haunted and weirded out. People told me they went here before and their phones just go, no service. Other people told me that they went here that they see lights on in the houses, but nobody lived there. Like, no cars, no businesses, nothing is open, no electricity. So I'm trying to figure out, does anybody live near this place? People keep telling me to go to the valley. I'm like, should I check it out or what? I want to go at nighttime, like when it's dark. I heard once you get to this area that like it's super quiet, like you can't hear nothing. Like the sound is just like nothing there. It is known as a ghost town in Connecticut. Does any of you live here? Anybody live near this place? Let me know in the comments if you live near this place. I wanna talk, man. Let's chat. If I go there, am I gonna make it out or what? Man, look at this place, man. Like, I wonder what's in there. Like, I'm the type to go in there and have no fear. Close to the public. I'm hearing a lot of things about the Valley of Connecticut. I'm hearing a lot of things about y'all.
This is another scary ghost story that comes from one of you guys. So Jack works for the Navy and he has to move into naval housing on base. But there's one bedroom in the naval housing unit that Jack gets a really bad feeling from. He says it always feels like someone's in the room looking at him. So he just keeps the door closed, doesn't go in it, but then eventually he gets married and needs a bigger bedroom and has to move into this room. And weird stuff immediately starts happening. The closet starts opening by itself at night. Furniture starts moving around when he's not looking. But here's the craziest part. Jack's story isn't unique. When he starts talking to a bunch of other people in the Navy about his experience, it turns out a lot of them also feel like their homes are haunted. After some digging, I actually found out that this Navy base was built on Gunjawamp, a haunted swamp in Connecticut. I do a whole deep dive on it in my podcast, but there's something weird going on there.
The Union Cemetery is nearly 400 years old and is known as one of Connecticut's most haunted spots. A lot of paranormal investigators have done extensive research here, including Ed and Lorraine Warren. There are numerous spirits who are reported to be lingering here, but the most spotted one is the Lady in White. She is described to have long black hair and to be wearing a long white gown. It is said that she likes to play jokes on people. She will appear in the middle of Route 99, be hit by a car only to disappear when the driver stops. She also likes to tap people on the shoulder and whisper in their ear. Nobody knows exactly who she was, but there are a few different stories. Some people say that she is the spirit of a woman who was murdered in the 1940s after killing her husband. Others believe that she is a woman who died during childbirth and she still roams the area looking for her baby.
This is Connecticut's Union Cemetery, deemed one of the most haunted places in the United States. Burials here date back more than 400 years. There have been many accounts of a white lady who haunts the graveyard. Many believe she is the ghost of a woman who died while giving birth. Over the years, many children have claimed to see the figure, as well as people driving by, reporting to see her standing in the road. They often stop their cars to help and no one is there. There are 2 women buried here who both may be the lady in white. One candidate is Harriet R. Seeley. You can see that visitors leave offerings and presents at her gravesite even to this day. Though interestingly, there is another Harriet buried here who could also be the lady in white, also having died during childbirth. Her name was Harriet Bryan.
Can a house be haunted if it's sitting underwater? It all started in 1895 when Thomas LeCount got the brilliant idea to move his 2-story, 28-ton home across the lake in Salem, Connecticut. And his plan was to use 18 draft horses to pull it across the frozen lake in the middle of winter. Unfortunately, it didn't pan out. When he started to pull the house across the lake, it got stuck, and then it got warmer. It continued to get warm until the house fell completely through the ice. The house was fully furnished and included a piano. Thomas received a $1,500 settlement for the soggy ordeal, but that's not the crazy part. Today, when people visit the lake, they say they still hear the sound of the piano playing underwater.
Our next stop to the most haunted locations in America is Connecticut. At number 1 in Easton, Connecticut is Union Cemetery. The paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren wrote a book about this cemetery, declaring it the most demonic burial ground in America. Here you can find the White Lady, and many passerbyers say that you can see her roaming the cemetery or even walking down the street. And at number 2 is Norwich State Hospital in Preston, Connecticut. Opening its doors in 1908 and having the first recorded death that year, this hospital is said to be the most haunted sanatorium in the country. Many paranormal investigators say you can still hear beeping sounds coming from equipment. It sounds like people are being operated on, and screams coming from each end of the hallways. Next is Devil's Hop Yard in East Haddam, Connecticut. These falls may look nice and inviting, but legend has it that the devil himself has hung out here. Many people have reported seeing shadowy figures, orbs, disembodied voices, and even called EVPs of people screaming. And finally, at number 4 in Southington, Connecticut, is the house that inspired The Haunting in Connecticut. This beautiful home is said to host a demonic entity. Even the paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren called this house possessed. Now, those reports were later unfounded, but you can't talk about Connecticut without talking about this wonderful home.
This town is so haunted they had to permanently close it to the public. This is Dudleytown, Connecticut. Dudleytown, Connecticut is a haunted, abandoned town in Cornwall, Connecticut, and has a creepy history. Visitors who have explored there say that once they enter, it's otherworldly in there. Creepy. First of all, it's reportedly completely silent. You can't hear birds, animals, bugs, nothing. A researcher compared entering the heart of Dudleytown to standing inside a recording studio booth. Another common complaint from visitors is that a lot of the photos they take in Dudleytown won't develop, but as soon as they leave, their cameras will work just fine. which makes sense as I had a really hard time finding really any photos of Dudleytown when I was researching. The creepy legend of the town is years ago, the Dudley family fled to the US after one of their family members was taken care of after plotting against King Henry VIII. They settled in Connecticut and the bad luck followed. Residents of Dudleytown began suffering a series of devastating crop failures and mental illness was rampant in the village. There were countless mysterious disappearances within the village, and all-around chaos overwhelmed Dudleytown. By the early 1900s, it was completely abandoned. For fans of the Conjuring films based on paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, the two visited Dudleytown and outright declared that it was extremely haunted and controlled by something terrifying. Investigators agreed that Dudleytown is some kind of a portal. But here's where it goes from spooky to downright bizarre. The owners, the Dark Entry Forest Association, closed Dudleytown to the public and don't do anything to dispel the rumors. In fact, they refuse to be interviewed for the most part, and the owners go to great lengths to conceal their identities. On top of that, if you are caught trespassing in Dudleytown, you will be heavily prosecuted. This is so strange to me. We see so many other ghost towns around the world, and usually they keep these places open for tourism. You know, profit off the history and the spookiness. But for some reason, this association wants to keep people out of Dudleytown altogether. A paranormal researcher said there's some kind of secret that they are keeping there, and they want people to stay out. What are your thoughts? This has been requested a couple times. Has anyone ever been? Or are there any towns by you that you find to be really creepy?
It was a bright summer day in 1906, and Dr. William C. Clark and his wife Harriet were driving slowly through a beautiful part of northwestern Connecticut called Litchfield County. Litchfield is a rural, very hilly area with lots of winding country roads, and the Clarks were there to try to scout out an area to build their second home. The couple lived full-time in New York City, where Dr. Clark was an oncologist, which is a cancer doctor, and he was also a professor at the Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons. And while the Clarks' lives were very exciting and fulfilling in the city, they were also very hectic and chaotic. And so the reason they had settled on Litchfield as the place to look for a location for their second home is because it was the total opposite of the city. It was quiet, it was peaceful, it was perfect. And so as this couple from New York City drove along these winding backcountry roads, they eventually reached this beautiful covered wooden bridge, and after they drove across it, they got this view up onto this mountainside off to their right, and high up on this mountain was this huge, shaded, beautiful forest. And they saw there was a road that appeared to kind of spider off and go into these woods. Now, the couple had no idea what was up there, but it was just so beautiful, and they were immediately so drawn to it that they decided they would go check it out and see if maybe there was a spot for their second home in these woods. And so Dr. Clark took the car and he went up this access road, and very quickly as they began climbing up this hillside, the road became very bumpy and overgrown. It was pretty obvious that not many cars were driving into these woods, and so before they even reached the tree line, Dr. Clark had to pull the car over and park it on the side of the road, and then he and Harriet got out, and then on foot they continued up towards the forest. And once the couple actually entered the forest, immediately the sunlight faded because the canopy over their heads was so thick, and the air became cool and refreshing. And after walking for only a couple of minutes, the forest, which at first seemed very still and quiet, suddenly became alive. They could hear birds chirping and animals running around and insects buzzing, and then up ahead they saw there was this field off to the side of the road that was full of all these wild apple trees growing in all different directions. And as they got closer, they saw there was just a deer right in the middle of the apple trees eating apples directly off the branches. And then just past all these apple trees, the couple began passing these huge, beautiful patches of roses and lilacs and bright yellow bitter tansy flowers that lined the road. And then before long, the couple was stepping over these babbling brooks, and off in the distance they could hear the sound of running water like fresh spring water coming down off the mountain. And then as the sun did begin to poke through the canopy above them, it almost looked like the forest was sparkling, literally. This forest was sitting on a hillside, and the hillside, which was made up of rock, had mica inside of it. And mica is a kind of mineral that when sunlight hits it, it almost looks like it's shimmering. And of course, there were the owls. As Dr. Clark and his wife walked farther and farther into this beautiful forest, they heard more and more owls hooting off in the distance. And to the Clarks, this made the forest feel enchanted. It was like the owls were personally greeting them. By the time the couple had turned around and begun heading back to their car, they had already made up their mind that they were going to build their second home in that forest. And so, after returning to their home in New York, they promptly put in the paperwork to purchase 1,000 acres inside of that Connecticut forest. And that forest had a name. It was called Dark Entry, and it was named that because it looked like from the outside, the forest was basically dark all the time. There was shade cast on it from mountains nearby, and then also the canopy inside of Dark Entry is exceptionally thick. At one time, there actually had been a town inside of Dark Entry Forest. However, all the people who had lived in that town were now all gone. The only remnants of this town were a couple of crumbling stone walls and a couple of home foundations that were scattered about the Dark Entry forest floor. The Clarks had seen some of these ruins as they walked along this overgrown path through the forest, but they weren't concerned. Instead, they felt like these ruins actually added some charm to the forest. After the land purchase was finalized, Dr. Clark began looking for local builders in Connecticut who could help him build this second home inside of Dark Entry Forest. But no matter how much money he offered these local Connecticut builders, they all said no. Now, none of them gave a straight answer to Dr. Clark about why they were turning him down, so Dr. Clark just kind of assumed that, hey, this project is not huge, it's just one house, and the forest is pretty isolated and hard to get to, and so he thought, probably these builders think it's not worth the effort. But Dr. Clark was not discouraged. He decided he would just build the house himself. After all, he was a very handy, competent guy who had grown up on a farm in New Jersey, and so he knew how to build things. And so, for the next several months, Dr. Clark would travel from New York City to Dark Entry Forest every weekend, and he would build this home. First, he cut down this massive swath of hemlock trees on this one flat patch of